Speaker, and I rise, of course, to support the Education, Training and Reform Bill of 2026, and a very important bill, of course, that builds on the ongoing investments and the reforms and policy measures and initiatives that we've been introducing continuously since 2014 to continue building the education state here in Victoria. Acting Speaker. Of course, this bill, as we've heard from previous speakers, contains several number of reforms and changes, but three particular provisions on which I do want to focus on. The first is obviously around the changes when it comes to First Nations community, recognising our First Nations communities in the Education Act. The second is around devices in schools, and the third, of course, goes to teacher registration program and framework. And when it comes to First Nations, we have so much to be proud of here in Victoria, Acting Speaker. Of course, we are the first state that has fulfilled every major pillar of the Uluru Statement from the Heart through voice, treaty and truth. We've introduced, of course, the nation's first People's Assembly, which is essentially the voice for First Peoples here in Victoria, which has evolved through the treaty legislation we moved some months ago now into what will become Galung Wal, and that is the First Nations term for the tip of the spear, as the First Nations community refer to it, and will continue to be the body that will guide and provide advice to government and indeed this parliament as well. The second element, of course, in our reforms when it comes to First Nations relates to truth. The pillar of truth, and in Victoria we established the Yuruk Justice Commission, of course, which was all about the Indigenous request for a truth-telling process to look at the whole history of Australia that goes back pre-First Fleet and pre-colonial settlement from 1788, to look at the entire history going back 60,000 odd years of traditional custodianship of these lands at the hands of First people communities. And of course I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people that are the traditional custodians of this part of our land, and my traditional custodians for my community in my electorate. But the other element, of course, is treaty. The landmark treaty, the first treaty bill that was passed here in Australia, was passed here in Victoria just recently by the Victorian Labor government. And a key element of treaty is the principle of self-determination, because what First Nations community have said and what all the evidence has said, even the Productivity Commission from an economic point of view has said that self-determination and embedding self-determination throughout a whole of government approach is absolutely fundamental if we are going to start working towards and making genuine strides towards reconciliation and closing the gaps, not just, of course, on socioeconomic data, whether it's health, mental health, unemployment, but particularly when it comes to education. And I'm really pleased that this bill amends the Education Act of Victoria. As we heard from the lead speaker, the Minister for Education, the Deputy Premier just earlier, the Education Act is actually one of the oldest acts on the Victorian statute books, one of the oldest acts. And so for us, Victoria, of course, was established as a colony way back in 1851. This building was built in 1856, and almost as old as what I like to say is Pentridge in my community. But in 1856, we had this Parliament of Victoria. And for all those years when the Education Act was passed a couple of decades later, there was no mention at all of First Nations people as being the first teachers on the land on which we meet. So it's important that we recognise that now in a modern Education Act. And it's even more important that we look to start embedding the notion of self-determination through the education system for First Nations communities as well, to support their educational outcomes as well. The second part of the bill that contains some substantive reforms go to devices in schools. Of course, we as a government were one of the first, if not the first, I believe, in Australia to basically ban devices through public schools. We're now personal devices, personal electronic devices, and we're now looking to extend that obviously to non-government schools. But the evidence is very clear. The evidence is very clear around the benefits. We introduced our mobile phone ban in government schools in 2020, requiring mobile phones to be switched off and stored securely during the school day, and the policy was designed to improve learning, student wellbeing and safety. And The research and the data, I believe, is quite clear, and also speak from the perspective of a parent. I'm a parent of two beautiful young daughters who are in grade 5 and grade 3 respectively, and I can certainly attest, like many other parents in this chamber and beyond in our communities, that the noticeable difference of when a child is on a device as opposed to when they're off it. And the data is very clear in that regard. It's shown that it's helping improve classroom focus and learning, it's reducing distractions during lessons, more student engagement is being experienced in classroom. Teachers are spending less time managing phone-related issues, and a 2024 survey of nearly 1,000 New South Wales principals found that 87% said students were less distracted and 81% said student learning had improved. And of course, it also improves social interaction. There's more likely to talk face-to-face at recess and at lunch with other students. There's increased participation in sport and physical activity during breaks, improved peer relationships and social connectedness, and also the correlation between reduced cyberbullying and online conflict as well. And we know the risks that are involved, of course, with social media, which has frankly been the Wild West ever since it sort of first came into being in the early 2000s and beyond. I grew up in, of course, the 1980s, 1990s era, very much pre-internet and pre-social media days, where we were lucky, I think, the generation of the Nokia 3210, where you were lucky to be able to send a text at best and maybe play a bit of game of Snake if you had a bit of time, but nothing along the lines of social media posting or TikToking or anything like that. So we have to change the legislation to reflect the challenges we're dealing with now with evolving technology, and this is an important step through this bill as we continue to enforce and tighten regulations around the usage of personal technological devices in public and non-government schools as well. And the third key element of the bill is around, of course, teacher registration program and framework and resourcing as well. And in that regard, I just want to acknowledge the important role of all of our teachers. Of course, I want to acknowledge the very strong pay offer that's been put forward by this government, which will see Victorian teachers the best paid in the nation, of pay rises between 28% to 32%, and substantial increases, of course, for educational support staff. Also going right through to our kinder and early years teachers receiving substantial pay offers as well. And our teachers and our education staff deserve nothing less. They are the heartbeat of our education system. They bring to life the curriculum and all of the new facilities and buildings that we've been delivering as a state government. And so supporting our teachers, recognising their important work, is absolutely essential. And it's a bill that really goes to the heart of the Labor movement and the Labor government, who we are as a Labor Party as well, because education, of course, is in our DNA, not just at a state level where we have literally put it on our number plates as the education state and put it as a #1 priority from a whole of government perspective, but going back many, many decades, you look at the tremendous reforms of Gough Whitlam and his opening up of the university sector so that it wasn't about how much money your family had, you actually had access to go to university for the first time. So that was seen through, of course, by Bob Hawke as well, through the introduction of HECS as well, to allow even more students to access university and higher education than ever before. Paul Keating, of course, continued that on. Kevin Rudd with the Building Education Revolution, and with Julia Gillard as well as Prime Minister through the introduction of the Gonski funding formula, and of course NAPLAN, which still remains the benchmark for how we continue to support and understand where we need to continue resourcing our education system as well. And as a state government, we've invested $38.6 billion into the education system since coming to government. Over 120 new schools, 50% of new schools built across this country are built right here in Victoria. We've got the best NAPLAN results. And it's not just about the facilities, it's also about the programs. Free glasses in schools, free dental in schools, Smile Squad, free public transport for kids, free mental health and wellbeing in schools as well, to support our growing number of neurodiversity families as well, particularly in my community. The Camp Sports and Excursion Fund, the Free Breakfast Clubs program, the Affordable Uniform program, and so much more. But particularly for my local community, we have invested in the order of between $150 million to $200 million to improve virtually all or most of our school facilities. $22.5 million to build a brand new Coburg Special Development School. Over $21 million for a new STEAM centre at Strathmore Secondary. $20 million new facilities at Ewlands Primary School. $17.8 million new tech hub at Coburg High School. $18 million new facilities that we've opened at Pascoe Vale Primary School. $11.9 million new STEAM centre as well at Pascoe Vale Girls College too. $10 million upgrade at Glenroy College and a further $1 million in this year's budget. $14.5 million at John Falconer Secondary College as well. We just announced in the recent budget $6.1 million towards delivering the concept master plan at the Marybeck Primary School and their concept master plan. $6 million Coburg North Primary School upgrades. $5 million previously for Pascoe Vale South, which we need to continue to invest in. But of course, Coburg Primary School planning funding. But there's more to do for West Spring Primary, Pascoe Vale North Primary, Coburg West Primary, my old school, and so many other schools. I commend this bill to the chamber.